Do you struggle to command attention in meetings, interviews, conversations with friends, sales pitches? Do you feel that no matter how hard you try to engage the attention of your audience members, they're just not interested in you? This can change and it will change. Because today, I want to share with you the storytelling techniques and tips that I employ to close 5- and 6-figure deals with Fortune 500 companies. These are also the exact techniques I use in my corporate training sessions with your employees. Storytelling is essential, and emotions are also essential in storytelling. But people often only think about positive emotions because it's natural for us to think, hey, I want my audience to feel happy, to be engaged, and have a positive impression of me. But positive emotions are not the only element that you want to have in your stories. For example, if I tell you a story starting with, hey, you won't believe what happened today in my sales pitch. I closed a deal with this client, the revenue is huge, and I'm really excited for the next one. You feel happy for me if you're a genuine friend. I'm not really engaging with you as far as emotions and suspense are concerned. But if I were to add on and say, you won't believe how difficult it was to have this client trust me. I had to go through so many barriers. In the beginning it was X and then Y and then Z. So when I introduce these negative emotions, all of a sudden you want to lean in. And the reason for that is because human beings are more sensitive to negative emotions than to positive ones. Which means that the sadness you feel from losing $100 is more than the happiness you feel from gaining $100. Negative emotions are what tie people in, are what engage people and draw their attention. There's a storytelling structure that I want to share with you that I use in my own corporate pitches as well as sessions. And the structure is such that I start with the normal way of life, chaos, where I introduce negative emotions and information, and the new way of life. So I can share with you this one experience. There's one time when I was pitching to the C-suites of a large company, and I was sharing with them about my offerings, and I could see that they weren't really paying attention. They weren't really engaged. I wasn't really drawing them in. And then I stopped and I said, hey, why don't I also share with you the difficulties that your competitors go through when they do not engage in such offerings, or when they do not integrate such ideas, products, and services in their own teams. And all of a sudden they lean in, not just because they want to find out about their competitors, but especially because it's something negative about these competitors. This information that I'm about to share is negative and appeals to their negative emotions, and then lean in. And once I feel that I've gotten their attention, I go to the new way of life, where I share about how my offerings could help them. And attached is a photo that we literally use while working with the employees and leaders at AIA, one of the leading insurance companies in Asia Pacific. As you can see, we start with the normal way of life, we move on to chaos, and then the new way of life. And when we do that in the way that we storytell, we appeal again to people's emotions, and these emotions are hardwired. Evolutionarily, we are more sensitive to negative emotions. So we want to make use of that and not just positive emotions. And once you have that, your storytelling skills are going to improve a notch, and you're going to be able to command attention even more. But that is actually not all, or at least not the complete picture as far as storytelling is concerned, because emotions are just one part of storytelling. Another component we want to keep in mind is the way that we build suspense, because that is another way that we engage people's emotions. Now, when I talk about suspense, I really want to talk about sentence structure. So imagine if I tell you this particular story. Hey, I met this client, I was speaking with her, and I thought that, hey, you know what? I was skeptical because I wasn't really sure how much revenue she could bring in for me. So I didn't really pay a lot of attention to her. But hey, one day she called me, and then I got to the office, met the team members, and they eventually expressed interest in us, and then we were able to strike a deal. So that's a pretty cool story. I mean, it's a winning story, success story. I closed a deal, but it's kind of draggy and monotonous because the sentence length is pretty similar. But if I were to tweak it a little bit and let it go along the line of, hey, I met this client. Initially, I was kind of skeptical because I wasn't really sure how much revenue she could bring in for me. But one day she called me and she invited her leaders to be there in the meeting. And all of a sudden, they expressed interest in our products. We established a long-term collaboration. So as you can see, I vary the length of my sentences. When I want you to kind of feel that nothing much is going on, speaking with the client and so forth, I prolong the sentence length. So you kind of follow me, but you're not kind of feeling any punch. And then I say, one day she called me. I shorten the sentence to create suspense. I signal to you that, hey, there's going to be a punch soon. And that's what you want to do when you tell stories. You want to vary your sentence length so you're able to create suspense. When you want the story or when you want to signal to your audience members that, hey, nothing important is going on right now, feel free to use longer sentences. And then when you wanted their attention, feel free to use shorter sentences. So you kind of capture them in that small space and you add your punchlines and your suspenseful moments in there. And that's how you add flavor to your stories. But again, emotions, positive, negative information, sentence structure, there are two very important elements of storytelling, but not all. Because the third element I want to introduce to you is all about your voice. And people tend to neglect the use of voice, even though it may seem commonsensical. I was once working with the CEO of a public listed company in Singapore, multi-millionaire, but he just does not know how to modulate his voice. And as a result, in an attempt to express gratitude to his team members and investors, he spoke in a really monotonous voice, and he thought, hey, that's not gonna work because these people are not really feeling my emotions. And I told him, hey, I completely hear where you're coming from, so let me introduce to you 3 elements of voice that we really want to pay attention to. These 3 elements are what fundamentally make up our voices. There is speed, which is how quickly you speak to create urgency, or how slowly you speak so that you create the effect that you would like. There's volume, how loudly you speak or how softly you speak. And there's pitch, high pitch, low pitch, to convey different types of messages. So I said, hey, instead of speaking in a monotonous manner, and I also know that you're a CEO, public figure, you probably don't want to be too animated or to create entertainment because that's not the persona that he would like to present to his team members and investors. I suggested that in his appreciation message, he use a more slow, constant volume, and deeper voice. So instead of it being conversational, like, hey, I just want to thank everyone, for supporting us from the beginning, it became more of like, morning everyone, I really would like to express my sincere gratitude for your support throughout the time that we've been established. I really look forward to our continued collaboration, to your continued support. So it's nothing too dramatic and it's not really hard to create. All we did was lower the pitch. We slowed down as well. So we lowered the speed, and that created seriousness and also genuineness. So people were drawn. In the annual general meeting, I was invited to be a listener. I could tell that the audience members were more engaged and they could feel him more compared to the last time when it was more monotonous and conversational. So of course you can be animated and create entertainment if you would like by increasing your speed, your pitch and so forth, your volume even. Some YouTubers tend to do that, but you don't have to. But you want to pay attention to these 3 elements and know that you can play around with them to create the effect that you would like. And feel free to experiment with them as well. Well, there's this final aspect about storytelling that I would like to share with you as well. And I see that often people do not get this right. So there are times, fortunately or not, when we listen to certain people speak, we could immediately tell that, hey, this person probably went to a generic public speaking class. And the reason for that is because your body language, the gestures are really robotic and overly rehearsed and systematic. And we don't really want that because you don't want to listen to someone who says, hey, good morning, I would like to introduce you to this person. The topic I'm talking about is this. And it just sounds really weird and not natural. And it could also make you seem kind of amateurish. And that's not the portrayal that you want to present, especially in business. People want to deal with individuals who are sophisticated, mature, and experienced. And when you start having robotic gestures, that's the last thing that you want to present. So as far as gestures are concerned, the tip, really underrated tip that I use for myself that I really have not heard anyone share is let your hands do their thing. Because evolutionarily, we are wired to know how to gesture. Think about it, when you're on the phone with someone, you're probably gesturing when you talk about time, space, events, people, and so forth. We know how to gesture. And even when you take a look at psychological research that looks into Paralympic athletes who are visually impaired, they know that certain signals and gestures are meant to convey certain things. For example, the victory pose or the sad pose. So we know that evolutionarily we are wired to use our hand gestures. So for the most part, when you speak, unless you're trying to use certain gestures to create effect, you want to just let your hands do a thing. So when I say intentional gestures to create effect, I'm talking about things like, hey, I want to share with you 3 messages today. Or hey, these are the things that I want you to pay attention to. Or maybe if you're walking around on stage, when you're conveying perhaps different time points of a story, you can walk at different points of the stage. Some people do that pretty effectively. For example, a CEO trying to share about the performance of a company throughout a year. They may stand at different points of the stage to convey different quarters of the business year, of the fiscal year, or different points, ups and downs that the business has gone through. And these are when you can rehearse them. But for the most part, the 2 things I want you to keep in mind. The first thing is to not over-rehearse your gestures, make them natural, because again, you're kind of wired to know how to gesture. The second thing is not to have erratic movements, because when we're nervous, we may either make erratic movements or we may fiddle with our bodies or our hands and so forth. Just make them gesture naturally. Make sure you're gracious, not erratic. And when you do that, you're gonna seem more mature, more professional, and you're also gonna engage your audience members even more. Not in a way that kind of wows them because of how graceful you are, but how professional and how composed you are. And these are things that are underrated and that we should pay attention to. So that's storytelling. There's positive, negative emotions and information. There's your hand gestures. There's vocal variety. There's sentence variety. And storytelling is such an essential skill because if you're able to command attention, you're able to succeed in about anything that you put your mind to, all things equal. And the person who knows how to storytell will always beat his counterpart who does not. If you'd like to find out more about storytelling, about persuasion, about charisma, feel free to check out the video that will appear right now. And until next time, I will see you.